On today's episode of Speak Shame with Dr Connie Kerali.
I actually worked in a really supportive place, and my husband is incredibly 50-50. I still managed to get really burnt out. I think the biggest thing for me is actually the internal belief system. My belief that I'm working hard against now to dismantle is rest equals lazy. As a working mother of 3 kids, my brain was telling me that I was being lazy every time I tried resting. So my message is actually listen out for that inner critic. Awareness is the beginning of change.
Hello, remarkable woman. I'm your host, Dr Connie Kerali, medical doctor, life coach and survivor of sexual violence. And you're listening to Speak Shame, a collection of inspiring conversations with remarkable women who have faced and overcome adversity. By sharing their stories, my hope is that you may find strength, connection and hope in your own journey, and that shame itself loses its power. So sit back, relax, and don't forget to follow the show. Joining me on this week's episode is the remarkable Is Ostrovskaya. Eve is a certified transformational leadership and matrescence coach, former Fortune 500 HR leader, and founder of Working Parent Coaching. A mother of 3, Eve draws from her lived experience of navigating career and motherhood to guide ambitious women through the identity-shifting journey of matrescence. Through her signature Just Matrescence Leadership Circle and individual coaching, Eve helps clients shed the weight of perfectionism and overwhelm. She empowers her clients to reclaim self-worth and unlock the leadership superpowers that parenthood brings. Her mission is to create a world where parents are viewed as a leadership asset. So thank you so much, Eve, for joining me here today.
Oh, what a beautiful intro. Thank you. It's a joy to be here, Colin. I'm looking forward to this.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. And we are going to start off with the question that I love to ask all of my guests because it gets so much insight and context into your life. And basically that first question is, if your life story was turned into a book, describe for me what would happen in chapter 1.
Chapter 1 for me is obviously everybody, I'm sure, goes to childhood. They must do. Well, I do anyway. I think for me, it was growing up in a fairly unusual household. My mum was stay-at-home mum for a long time, and then she worked all sorts of part-time jobs. And predominantly she worked as a librarian, so she spent a lot of time surrounded with books. And I feel like I've inherited that love of books from her. So after school, I'd go and sit behind bookshelves in the library and just immerse myself into fiction. And my dad was and is still a magician. So that's a little known fact. Not something I openly talk about, so why not share it on a podcast?
Amazing.
So he ran his own sort of passion business where he did magic tricks for kids and really, really amazing talent. So we were this slightly oddball bubble. I don't know any other people who had that kind of combo, but I think that's where it started for me, thinking about, especially after becoming a mother myself. And my husband's from a very different upbringing, which is always interesting when you have children together. So I think for me, it's that being in that very creative, relaxed home. Growing up, it's my chapter 1. Just have very cozy, snuggly memories of it being soft light and lots of snow outside, and sitting and reading my book, and maybe my dad practicing his magic tricks on the side.
Oh, that does sound magical. And I have to say, for people who are listening and not watching this on YouTube, Eve is telling the truth in that she is still surrounded by books this day, and in her background is just shelves and shelves of books. So I'm glad that that has continued into adulthood as well.
It's a borderline obsession, Connie, but good ones.
I love that. And what I'd like to know then really is, what then led you into this world of matrescence coaching and transformational leadership coaching, because you've talked about this early journey, this love of books and your upbringing as well. If you could guide us through the journey that you've had.
Growing up in Soviet or post-Soviet Russia, I always had this dream of moving to the so-called West. It felt growing up very forbidden, and the borders were still closed for a long time until I was in my late teens. So the minute they opened up the borders, I was like, oh, how can I leave? So the journey really started going from the east to the west a lot. And so I moved to London after I finished university in St. Petersburg in Russia, and really wasn't sure whether the UK was the right place. But it so happened my boyfriend at the time found a job here, and I followed him and fell completely in love with London. I'm very unlikely to move anywhere else. I absolutely love it. So I think what happened next is there was a decade off in my 20s. There was a decade of fairly hard work. I would say I actually didn't want to have kids. So it's a fun fact about me. A coach who works with mothers. I actually had a bet with my teenage friends group that I would never have kids, which I lost miserably. I'm in
If they're
3.
listening.
But I think, and for many women of my generation, so I was born in the early 80s, I find we grew up with genuine belief that we can be anything we want. So we were really lucky to be born on the laurels of that first and second waves of feminism. So there was not real thought in my head, can I not achieve a career because I'm a woman? That was not even in my head. So I think thinking back to my 20s, I very much spent time working towards a career. There were quite a lot of hurdles coming from abroad, not speaking English as the first native language. So there were quite a lot of things I had to do to really, I like to say that I spent my 20s fitting in, which is, it's got some connotations. It's not really an ideal thing to do, but it just happened that way. And I didn't really feel the burden of it. It felt more like a challenge. So learning English, finding a job, staying in a job, getting promoted and earning more money, getting a bigger title. And I've always wanted to work towards a leadership position. I have no idea why. Like I've always had this drive. I want to be a manager at some point, which I did eventually become in my late 20s, early 30s. And so through just spending time to just hold on to the career that I got into, I also then had a couple of kids in the meantime, my mid-20s. So I had my first child fairly early for current standards. So I was 27. And I was very determined not to give up my work. And I think having come from abroad and having had real struggle getting in and finding work, it's hard for everyone, but it is a little bit harder when you don't really speak the language very well. I was like, there's no way I'm taking a career pause. There's no way I'm not returning to work. So both kids I had in my late 20s, and I was like, no, it's out of question that I will not continue working. And that had come up with my ex-partner, where he was sort of saying, why don't you take a break and look after the kids? And I was like, this is borderline offensive to me because I've just worked so hard to get here. And I completely appreciate that. That was I think I was just thinking in a very tunnel vision. It probably would have been really good for me to take a break at the time, but I didn't. And so then in my 30s, really, I went through a divorce. So a divorce from my first husband. And I met my new husband, Phil, who's now my husband. I got married last year and we had a child together. So our son together is Phoenix and he's 7. So I had him when I was 36, I think, and gave birth. And through my 30s, I then also got into leadership at the same time. And although I look back on my 30s as I had so much success in my work, I was doing the most fulfilling type of work. I worked in HR, but it was very much the kind of HR that I've always wanted to get in, where I could actually use my psychology degree, where I ran workshops, I worked with inspirational leaders, I did coaching as well. So it was incredible. And whilst doing all of that, we were establishing a new relationship with Phil, my husband now, and dealing with my older kids were with us for a week off, week on. through shared custody with my ex-husband, and then also a new baby on our lap. So 30s were really what I would say that was like crunch time. Like my body was so tired through it because I was getting very little sleep. There's a lot to do in a household full of kids. But we were both working in really busy jobs. So I kind of look back at that decade as exciting, extremely rewarding. I was on that top of the Maslow's pyramid of needs most of the time, feeling very self-actualized, but I was also ridiculously exhausted, ridiculously tired. So it was like a weird combo of feeling incredible for my brain, but actually feeling depleted physically for a number of consecutive years towards my late 30s. And so I think that's the moment where I was like starting to get curious, like, people do this. Like, can I be doing this and doing this? Feels like 3 jobs. Like, it doesn't even feel like 2 jobs. This is a lot. So having lived that period, and I paid for it. There were some physical consequences. I was diagnosed with a thyroid condition. I had miscarriages. I was not well generally. I had this number of years of just feeling ill for no good reason. And now I think about it, well, of course he didn't, mate. Like, he didn't sleep. He had a lot of work-related stress, work travel, time zone changes, flying to the US for weeks at a time, and having baby at home. So I think that period for me solidified that something had to change and I had to do something differently. And this is the stuff that I work with women in leadership who are mothers. And the discovery of matrescence came from that period in my late 30s where I just felt, on the one hand, motherhood has made me a leader. I am more patient, more empathetic, more connected to people, more curious about people. But at the same time, it also made me really tired and really depleted. So my mission is really to help these women work through that crossroads. And actually, with hindsight, I know that I was a good leader because I was also a mother at the same time. It gives you so many skills that no training program can give you. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but it's like decades after decade of experiential learning, I guess, and sort of making it into a career. So then now realize in my 40s that actually I want to pause that side of my career and actually help people who are in that moment, because I actually didn't have any help at that time when it was really, really hard. And I just really want to see more women not give up their careers and find that, I hate to use the word balance because this really doesn't feel like balance at the time, but find a way to do it in a healthier way so that they're not coming out into their 40s feeling depleted with a medical condition. So that's why. That's my why.
I love that summary. Honestly, just going through the decade and, as you said, experiential learning, I can imagine that there are going to be so many women listening to this who are just like, I am where your story's at right now. Like, I know what that feels like. How does it feel for you, firstly, to reflect back on everything that you went through in your 20s and in your 30s?
So part of my training this year is called Mamarizing training. And it's a fabulous, fabulous lady, Amy Taylor-Cabaz in Australia, who founded Mamarizing. And it's phenomenal. I'm about to become certified next month. Fingers crossed. So I can deliver it to other women as well. But Amy's whole premise of her coaching concept is you look at your life and where you're at as a mother in the context of what's happening, how you were brought up, what ideas you were brought up, what ideas you had about being a successful woman and a career versus what ideas you have, but also fed by the society around what it means to be a good mother at the same time as a successful woman. So all these kind of concepts have been, I guess, I was immersed in them, but now looking back, especially having gone through the Mamarizing training, I'm like, oh yeah, no wonder I didn't want to like pause my career, because for my entire upbringing, that was the in thing to make it in the West and to be a successful woman. So motherhood kind of came secondary to me actually for a long time. So looking back on it, I think what I lacked is actually somebody explaining to me that some of these concepts that I had in my head weren't even my concepts. They were things that were fed to me by the society and my parents, likely, my friend group. So I think just kind of right now, I look back on it with kindness and understanding that any decision that I made, even the decisions that maybe led me to feeling unwell or at times feeling like a bad mum, it's a classic, or feeling like I had to say no to further career opportunities, which I did because I had a family. So, and at the time, I felt frustrated, and maybe that I was letting myself down and my family down. But now I look back on it and kind of go, it's okay. You made the best decisions with the information you had. So I kind of feel almost like I'm stepping out of that being in that swirl or stress and burnout lifestyle. Because I remember, side note, and this is something that a lot of women have shared with me. So for those who are listening, it's that feeling you're on a treadmill. And we all feel like that at times in life. I felt like that pre-kids as well. But you can't come off the treadmill. So once you've had the child, it's not like a pet. You can't give them up. And nobody really talks about this, but you kind of come into realization of, whoa, this is a lot more work than I expected. And then, of course, in my case, I ended up having three from having moved all the way from, I'm not going to have kids, I'm just going to have a successful career, to having three children. You're on the treadmill, and times you're running, like you're doing stuff whilst running. Sometimes it's like you're walking or crawling on it. But the feeling you have is like it never actually stops. So there's never a moment, even when you're asleep, there's never a moment when that treadmill is actually still and you're truly resting. So that's kind of like a side feeling of constantly on this treadmill. But it just feels, now that my kids are older, I actually feel like I can stop the treadmill and actually chill. When your kids are really young, that treadmill never stops. And that feeling of days are just passing by and things are just happening in your life and you're completely not in control. Like you're really losing control of what's happening and how fast your life is going, how much you're doing. So I think the nicest feeling I have now in my 40s, having decided to change from corporate and to go towards running my own business, is that I'm more in control of the treadmill speed. And I can actually sometimes switch it off and come off it and just sit in a chair and put my feet up. No, that was the feeling that I was really craving when I was busy with young kids and financially couldn't quit corporate. I couldn't take a pay cut. You kind of get yourself to a place where you're dependent on that job and you enjoy it, but also you can't really step away. So I craved that feeling of, I just want the treadmill to stop for a little bit, and it's not like even on holiday, you still work, you're providing childcare on holiday. You're playing with the kids. It's not real rest. Like anybody who's a parent have been on holiday recently, we're now in summer holidays. It's freaking exhausting. That's not stopping on the treadmill. That's just doing other work. So I think for me now, kids are older. I'm no longer in a full-time corporate leadership job. And I'm also doing the work that actually feeds my energy, which is a big deal. That's something that I speak about with a lot of my clients actually ended up resigning from their leadership positions and are now doing more of a gig work, because you really need to figure out what actually lights you up as you go further into your matrescence journey. So again, lots of long-winded answers coming from me, but I think to sum it up, it's just looking back, it feels things have slowed down, and I feel I can purposefully slow it down and speed it up as opposed to I'm on this autopilot treadmill, which is a horrible, horrible feeling when you're doing it for years.
Your answers are wonderful. That analogy of being on the treadmill, it really conjures up that feeling of the exhaustion that's there with it, the fact that sometimes it slows down. A lot of the time it's going really fast and wanting to be able to get off it and just rest, that desire for rest. And I wonder for the mums who are on that treadmill, who are really tired, what words of wisdom, what advice could you give to these women?
Oh, so much. So much advice.
Where to begin?
Easy. Always easy. Always easy to give advice. If I think about myself, so probably the best person to give advice is me, the younger me. I think the biggest hurdle I actually think wasn't external. I think the biggest reason why I got myself so tired was my internal belief and internal drive. So interestingly, maybe a good example of it, because my work was super supportive, super flexible. And although it was stressful, a lot of the stress was actually internally driven. So I have to say that. I didn't work for a place that weren't supportive of women or mothers. I actually worked in a really supportive place, and I still managed to get myself very stressed. And my husband is incredibly 50-50. So we have such a good teamwork at home. So I can't even say, oh, I've carried so much load. Not really. He does just as much as I do, truly. So those are the two areas where I would say, actually, if you have a work that isn't supportive of you as a mother or as a carer, and you have a partner that isn't as 50-50, or you don't have a partner, that's extremely hard when you're a single parent. So those are the two areas to look at first. What kind of context are you operating in? How is your work with what you need? And is it the right type of work or right environment for you? And if you do have a partner, what conversations have you had with them to agree who is chipping in at what and make it teamwork? But what I'll say is, with those things, I actually had those things established really well. I still managed to get really burnt out and stressed. So I think the biggest thing for me is actually the internal belief system. Mine, as I recently discovered through years of being coached with a coach, and I found this in my classes with Amy, my belief, to boil it down, and something that I'm working hard against now to dismantle, is rest equals lazy.
Yeah.
That's something I grew up with. And I have my grandmother's voice in my head. It's not my mum. So my gran was very different to my parents. My mum's mum, very tough, a tough little lady. And she, she lived through a couple of wars. She was abused as a child. So she had a really, really tough life. And as a result, she came out very tough and very productive. Like, you really have to, there's no slowing down, no sitting down in her house. When I would go and stay with her, she'd be like, right, mop the floors, do this, do that. There was always something that we were told to do. And it's lovely, really good, taught me good skills, good work ethic. But what I found is actually that caused a huge amount of inner critic for whenever I wanted to rest, or my body actually physically needed rest as a working mother of 3 kids with a good, solid career. Rest is fundamental. So it wasn't I didn't have opportunities to rest. My brain was telling me that I was being lazy every time I tried resting. So anybody who's listening and you have a similar inner critic that tells you that when you're sitting down doing absolutely nothing is lazy, you might have a little bit of that going on as well. So it's taken me years to understand what is it. So I've never felt guilty for working, because for me it was like a given. A lot of women that I work with actually feel guilty for leaving their child and going to work. And it's quite common in the white middle class community in the UK and in the US. I found it's a layer of society that had a targeted messaging for those mothers that you have to spend every single minute of your day with your child for them to work out okay. Where I came from, working class Russia, that wasn't the messaging. Everybody has to work was the messaging. So I never felt guilty for working, but I felt guilty for resting. So I have like this weird relationship with rest. So my message is actually listen out for that inner critic. It'll be different for everybody. So for some women, it will be, oh, you've gone back to work, bad mum, how dare you? Like, you're damaging your child, which is complete rubbish, complete and utter rubbish. For other women, like me, it wasn't that voice. It was like, yeah, good, you've got childcare, fantastic, you've got a career. It was, what you're doing sitting down for? You could be doing something. You just get into this like obsessive, overproductive superwoman mode that is impossible to come out of without help. If I'm really honest, I think I only got through that inner voice through work with a coach. So I guess advice is just listen to that inner critic in your head, because although your circumstances might not be supportive, the work starts with your own head and how you think, and those negative thoughts about what you're doing wrong typically are things that you've built into your belief system that might not be helpful.
Such invaluable advice. And I think that it's such a great place to start, isn't it? When you realize that actually it's inner work that needs to be done, but also great points as well as that if your work isn't supportive, if you don't have that support from another partner as well, those are obviously important areas to look at. And I'm interested in knowing, because I know obviously you are now aware of that inner critic and the message that you've been telling yourself. Have you started taking steps towards rest and incorporating rest? And if so, how easy are you finding that, if at all?
I mean, I feel like it might be lifelong work in progress, but I wish I knew of that inner critic actually, because I actually thought when I was in my late 30s and really run down, I thought it was externally driven. And now I realize it was internal. It was the internal pressure to do more, to never rest, to not give up or not like stop. Awareness, my mental coach actually says this wonderful line: awareness is the beginning of change.
Mm,
And I truly believe that when you've called something, you don't look at it anymore in the same way. So when my grandmother's voice is in my head saying, "Oh, you should log on and do more stuff," or you should, when you hear that should, it's typically in particular. So for me, just knowing that it's not me and knowing that it's sometimes just not really helpful. Sometimes it's really helpful. Sometimes it's like, oh, I can have the most productive day thanks to that attitude, thanks to that drive that goes, all right, now enough rest, get going. So there is a healthy output from it, but you know when it's not healthy. You'll know physically that when it's not healthy. I think so.
mm,
The biggest shift I actually made, and this is helping me in my 40s as well with the hormones, is another way my inner critic was showing up in was exercise.
mhm,
So I've always loved exercise, have a huge commitment to all sorts of exercise. But somehow through my 20s and my 30s, I came to believe that only hardcore exercise is exercise. Like hardcore intensity, 90 minutes spinning class is exercise. Going for a walk in nature is not exercise. That's for lazy people. Okay, so the things that I've really shifted towards is also a thing, the appreciation that my body is getting older. It is transforming. I am knocking on the door of perimenopause. So that is helping as well.
mm.
But I think the whole awareness of doing more and doing other things is really what I need right now at this stage of my life. So I'm now a lot more comfortable saying I've been for a 15-minute walk and I'm going to count that as exercise.
I like
And
that.
I no longer have that feeling of, oh, you really underdelivered this week because you've only been on a couple of walks and a swim.
Mm,
And I'm like, well, it's pretty good. So that's just one of the examples, I think, where that awareness is helping me just poke at all things that I say to myself that might not be helpful anymore.
yeah, yeah, beautiful example there. And you talked about your body changing, you talked about hormones. And for the listeners who've maybe never heard of the word matrescence, I wonder if you could explain to them what that is and why you are a matrescence coach.
I came across the word matrescence last year. So I'm very, very new to the concept, despite having been a mother for 15 years at that point when I read the word. And I read it in a beautiful book written by Lucy Jones called Matrescence. And highly recommend it. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And since I've researched and signed up for Amy's Mama Rising course, so I now know so much about matrescence. But reading it for the first time, and a lot of other women described it that way, it's almost like you feel you've been carrying this weight on your shoulders as a mother, and you read the word and you read the description, and you just feel your shoulders drop, and you kind of go, ah, it's not me, it's normal. So matrescence, it's an artificially made up word. It was coined in 1970s. So We're talking over 50 years ago by an anthropologist, a lady called Dana Raphael in the US. And she came out with that word after she became a mum. So she was a career woman, and presumably she was working in the 70s. So she was working at that time when the feminist movement was really strong, and there was a lot of career opportunities created by that movement for women. And since becoming a mum, she kind of went, hang on a second. This is a bigger deal than anybody tells me. Like, people just think you pop a baby out, go back to work, or stay at home. It's no big deal. Many, many women before you did it. So she was the first one to point out this experience is truly minimized. This is huge. I've just created a human being who's now going to go on and have their own life. And I feel like I've changed through that experience. So she was the first one to say it. And the way matrescence was described to me is, if you think about adolescence, right? We understand a lot about the teenage years now and adolescence and processes that happen during that period. And they're deeply transformative processes. You with your background know better to explain better than me from the medical side of things, but it is physically you change, your body transforms and never goes back to how it was pre-puberty. Your brain continues to develop and completely reforms neurologically. It's a psychological change. Everything is a little bit awkward. Everything is a little bit hard. Everything is a little bit moody. There are huge spikes of hormones. There is a societal pressure on you as a teenager as you're changing. Your voice changes. Your period comes in if you're a woman, if you're a girl. So adolescence is seen as a huge period of transformation that you can never go back from to your old self. So what Dana Raphael and subsequently more researchers looked into it more recently in the recent 20, 30 years, and they've actually studied women's bodies and brain and also spiritually what's happening to the women after they become mothers. And there are studies now showing that actually the process of matrescence is very similar to the process of adolescence, where as a human being, you fully transform into a different version of you. You really move from the notion of me and I to the notion of us when you become a mother. And it's a strong hormonal and physical change for a birthing mother, so for those who carried their child. But they're now starting to study non-biological mothers and parents, and they're also seeing similar transformation that happens in their brains. There's some really brilliant articles now with actual data, but it's essentially your brain changes. Your brain changes after you become a mother, especially biologically, but it actually also happens through adoption and surrogacy, and it happens for hands-on carers, dads, etc. So actually matrescence is huge. It's a huge transformational, irreversible process that happens to mothers and surrounding carers as well through hands-on mothering or fathering. And it's something that I'm so passionate about becoming a normal understanding that if you support women, in this case, particularly I work with mothers, if you support women who are going through matrescence in the way you would support a teenager, with kindness, support, understanding that they're going through something really huge and really difficult, we would ultimately have those mothers come into the society in a very different way. So if I think about people in corporate leadership who go and have children, you come back in and you come back a very different person to work, but it's not really truly acknowledged. It's very much seen as this body is back at work. Here's your workload, crack on. And also, when are you going to get back in shape? So it's like properly messed up. So that's the best explanation I can give. But actually, I'll send you some links to resources because there's some really, really cool reading that's starting to come through on matrescence, and more research is being done that it's actually a bigger deal than we've been told. Much bigger deal.
Thank you. If people are hearing this for the first time, I'm sure they're also thinking, I need to find out more. So I will make sure that all those links are in the show notes. And I also want to get your details, but I have another question actually as well for you, because I love your mission. I'll read it again. Is to create a world where parents are viewed as a leadership asset. And I wonder, from the work that you do, from the people that you've met along the way, what has been your experience with regards to that connection between parents and leadership positions in the workplace?
And this is both parents for me. So this is
Yeah.
mothers and a modern dad who's a hands-on dad or a non-birthing parent, adoptive or surrogacy. They're all for me in that category of they go through, I almost see parenting as a training ground. So you go through this fundamentally hardcore boot camp when you become a parent and you develop certain skills and you can actually take those skills to work. But what's really, really cool is, so when I was talking about the neurological changes in your brain, the areas that get affected by the neurological changes are the same areas we want leaders to develop: empathy, connection to people, clarity, prioritization, multitasking. So they're all the same areas that you might see advertised in a leadership development program. The exact same areas and skills that you gain from being a parent for a number of years. It starts through matrescence, it starts through when you begin your journey, but you continue developing because you're managing your own team at home. You're a leader at home as a single parent, or you've got a couple of co-leaders at home. You're using the exact same skills. But what's even more exciting for me is that your brain has been rewired to get better at those things. So I think what isn't talked about enough, and I'm starting to see some of that content on social media, but it's like literally in its infancy, that I'm not saying that you can't be a good, strong leader if you're not a parent. Absolutely not saying that. But what I am saying is that through parenthood, through matrescence, through patrescence as well, it's like a leadership accelerator. And it's currently in society, especially in corporate, it's not seen as that at all. It's seen as a detour, or she's gone back and she's got a bit of a foggy mummy brain now. It's actually seen as a weakness, and it diminishes your almost leadership status, especially for women, for many, many different reasons. A lot of expectations on the women in general, but when you become a mother, it's like this whole host of other stuff to absorb or fight. So the reason I really want this to be more known is that we're missing an opportunity as a society to actually tap into ultimately low cost training for leaders. And instead of supporting parents, and many organizations are starting to click that actually, these are people with some brilliant skills coming back to the workforce. I better keep them. There was an article on LinkedIn this morning about Google and what programs they've developed to support parental transitions. And it's amazing. I mean, that's a huge tech business investing into that. So it's starting to look more positive. People are starting to realize actually, this aren't like the bottom ranking talent in my organization. These people who are absolutely leadership potential. And if they're leaders now, they need that support to truly tap into those skills. And I can tell you, haven't been a leader myself, I was a different leader for my teams than I would have been pre-kids. I can tell you 100%. Because the main shift for me, when you become a parent, you're forced to learn to become selfless. You're forced to learn to let go of ego and the focus on you. That's what children do to you. For birthing mums, it starts through pregnancy. You completely put yourself on hold to create a human being and carry them to term and give birth. That's the most selflessness developing act I can think of. So that shift in, it's no longer about me, it's about somebody else. When you bring that to work as a leader, if you think about all those leadership notions of servant leadership that's been going around for decades, pathetic leadership, leading through kindness, that's the stuff that you already developed. You're just bringing it to your team. So when I was a leader at work, I know I was using my matrescence skills that I developed at home with my team, because you no longer see the world through the same lens. You see the world through that lens of being there for other people, ultimately.
Oh, I think it's so wonderful to hear that actually, if we look at things in a different way, you've got your leaders already there in the workplace, and people who are listening to this today and are inspired by what you are saying are going to be like, well, how do I work with Eve? How do I get in touch? And so share with the audience the best ways to find you, the best ways to work with you.
Of course. So the best way, I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram, so I'm very present on those platforms. I'm not very good with any other one. So look for me there, Eve Ostrovskaya on both. And I have so many different ways of working with me because I kind of feel mothers in leadership are very, very, very busy people. And also, it's a double-edged sword. What I just said about selflessness and being there for other people, we're not very good at being here for ourselves. So the programs that I offer are very, very flexible. So I have a group coaching session that is a monthly drop-in, no commitment, low cost, come in and just work through whatever is going on for you, be it leadership challenge, be it a career decision, be it motherhood is really dragging you down. That's a very easy, that's probably, I would say that's probably the most common way of my clients getting to know me because it's very low commitment. And I'll send you my website details where I've got my schedule of those. And then I have one-to-one coaching where I really work with some of the women that have decided to go for more tailored support, or it tends to be women who've either just come back from maternity leave or upgraded to another child and about to come back from maternity leave. But I also worked with a few women who are sort of further into their career and their kids are actually older and they're thinking about what's in it for me now. So I work with women on different stages of matrescence. And that's my one-to-one programs where we really work out a schedule that works for you. And that's, I can't reiterate enough. I am not rigid about how often we meet and the duration of sessions. All of that is discussed and we can talk about because it depends on your circumstances. The baseline is I really understand you're on that treadmill generally that isn't stopping. So flexibility is always there. And if I'm really honest as well, I'm actually just always really happy to chat to women in leadership in general, whether you're actually a mother or you're maybe working with parents on your team and you want to support them better. So I offer free discovery sessions, and that's really open to anyone who is matrescence curious or wants to understand a little bit more about this crossroad between leadership and matrescence. So that's always there for people who just want to chat to me. And that's the reason I'm running this business is also to connect with more people. So it's not all come and work with me as a client. It's also actually networking and get in touch and be very, very happy to tell more about what matrescence is. And this whole leadership superpower concept, I think, is fascinating.
I will put all of that into the show notes. And I love leadership superpower. And I wonder if there's anything else before we come to a close. Is there anything else that you feel like, actually, I wish I'd said something about this?
I think two things. If I was to really boil down all my messaging to mothers in general, mothers in leadership specifically, because that is my client niche, but mothers in general, whatever your career choice, forget about that for now, is it's two messages. One, it's not you. It's the society and the times we live in. And that will make sense to all mothers because we all think it's me. It's my fault. I've done something wrong. I'm failing at this. So it's not you, simply. And second message is something that I'm just so passionate about is kindness to yourself and really looking at yourself through the eyes of you as a mother. You look at your children with so much compassion and kindness. And we can be so critical of ourselves, so critical of ourselves. So my one big word that I want all mothers to live by is kindness, and that's to yourself. I know you can be kind to other people, but start with yourself. Start that kindness to yourself, whatever it looks like, even if it's just saying that word to yourself first thing in the morning. So that's two things for me. It's not you, it's the system, and kindness. Remember kindness.
Those are beautiful messages to end on. And actually, when I say end on, one final question, because I always like to find out if you could name one remarkable woman who has inspired you, who would it be and why?
Gosh, I've got such a long list. Such a long list. I'll mention, because I already mentioned Lucy Jones and Amy Taylor Cabaz. I mean, they've been incredibly inspirational. I'll move from that and I'll go to, I actually love the work that Kate Winslet is doing with her messaging. I mean, I've always really appreciated her work and her career, but I just love some of her messaging on social media more recently about really standing out for yourself and finding a voice and not putting up with bullshit that a lot of people have to and choose to put up with. So from Kate Winslet, I can look to her. I love her messaging around have a voice, stand up for what you believe in, and just call out anything that doesn't feel right, that feels offensive, that feels like it might be misogyny, or anything that feels like an attack on your personal dignity. I just think she's an incredible voice for the women's community out there. And I kind of almost feel like she's now come out into the age of, there's another woman that comes to mind, but she's come to the age of sagescence. So there's another term and that's out there. And that's when you travel through matrescence, you go through your menopause journey and you actually become that wise woman and the sage woman that can give advice to younger women. So I kind of feel some of her messaging is just incredibly wise and so important to young girls and young women, young mothers, and all mothers out there. So I'll go with Kate. If you're not listening to what she's putting out on social media right now, follow her. It's really, really inspirational and makes you kind of feel like you're part of a women's movement as well.
Thank you so much. And yes, to Kate Winslet, another remarkable woman. And thank you, Eve, so much as well. It's been my absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed having this conversation with you today. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Connie. It was a joy to hang out with you. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you for listening to Speak Shame with Dr. Connie Kerali. And thank you so much to Eve Ostrovskaya for being my guest on this week's show. Please take a look at the show notes for information on Eve's social media handles so that you can connect with her. If you'd like to join the community, head over to @Dr. Connie Kerali on Instagram. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to get a new episode every other Thursday. Until next time, take care.